Fingerprints. That's the thing that we can unequivocally use to identify a single person. Well, we've all heard about them, but what are they and how do they work? We'll start with a little bit of history of a story that put fingerprints on the map of forensic analysis. We have the case is what they call the Rojas Homicides. I think it's pronounced Rojas, not Rojas. Anyway, the Rojas Homicides. This is in 1892. We have the case was Francisca Rojas' two children were stabbed to death. And in a different room, she was attacked also, and she had her throat slit. That's what she said. And she was a witness, and she knew who did it. She said it was her angry neighbor, Pedro Velasquez. Apparently, Pedro Velasquez asked her for something, and she refused, so he got angry. He killed her children and slashed her throat before he ran out. That was her story. He went to the children's room, then ran after her and chased her, slit her throat, and that was that. And then she approached the police. And the throat being slit was not, it was just slit. It was not a dangerous wound. But anyway, that was her story. That was her story. She did not touch her children after, when they were attacked. He attacked the children, and chased her out and attacked her. So, of course, they found this Pedro Velasquez, and they took him to jail, and they demanded he confess. And they tortured him for 2 weeks. And one of the forms of torture was tying him, very closely to the two corpses for all night long, which was a horrifying thing. I believe it's part of that kind of the culture that this town had, where if the corpse is tied to the suspect, if he really did it, he will confess, or something along those lines. Anyway, they did that for 2 weeks, but he was one stubborn guy. He absolutely refused to confess, despite all the things they were putting him through. They looked at the crime scene. They found a fingerprint on a doorpost of a place that Francisca claimed she was not in. And they examined it, and they said it actually was Francisca's. They proved it was hers by showing that the fingerprints were identical with her fingerprints. So she had lied. She said that he attacked the children in that room, and she was not there, and he chased after her, when apparently she was in that room with the children at the time they were attacked. She had lied. And eventually they got her to confess, and she admitted what exactly happened. She killed her own children because she wanted to marry someone for whatever reason, and he said he wasn't going to marry her because she had children. He didn't want to have to take care of her children. So she killed her own children. And she blamed the innocent Pedro Velasquez. So it was because of the fingerprint that an innocent person was exonerated, and that a seriously guilty person, was brought to justice. Because this is one of the reasons why people decided, hey, fingerprints are the way to go. They are very important and something to use to identify one single person. So, the first thing you have to know about a fingerprint is that it is considered an individual characteristic. Remember, we talked about two kinds of evidence. There is individual evidence, individual characteristics, and there is class characteristics, class evidence. Class evidence just narrows it down, like to a certain kind of a gun. Individual characteristics, evidence that has individual characteristics, isolates it to one single person or one single situation. In the fingerprints are the sought after individual characteristic, and the principle is that everyone has an individual fingerprint. No two fingerprints are the same, not even of identical twins. Also, they don't change as a person ages, so the fingerprint that you have when there was one crime done can be matched to a person 20 years later. Just check the fingerprint of the person and see if it matches. They don't change. In addition, they really can't be changed very easily either. Even if the person tries to burn off his finger, those parts of his fingers, it doesn't really obscure the fingerprint that well. Anyway, the third principle of that fingerprints that enable them to be used is that they can be classified, and there are parts of it that can use it for individual identification. So you can actually tell the difference between two different ones. You can classify the difference between any two different fingerprints, and therefore you can identify one person, the one single person who will match that fingerprint. In fact, of the 75 million fingerprints that are on file in this country, not a single one was identical. And they don't change with age. And we obviously know that you can classify fingerprints, and we can study fingerprints and analyze them to be able to match them and to be able to show where they're different, where they're the same. Well, fingerprints, what are they? And how do we identify what makes two fingerprints the same or different? Well, you look at your own finger, and you'll see your fingerprint. There are lines in your finger. These lines, there may be some advantages to it. They help people grab slippery surfaces, because if your hand would be completely smooth, then you wouldn't be able to grab a smooth surface that well. The friction would go down. However, with the lines, there you can, there's more friction. You can grab things more easily. These, by the way, these lines in the fingerprint, they were created on a person while they were still in the womb. And there are various movements as they moved around the womb, and whatever fluids were around, and that the fingers touched as the finger was created in the womb, as the fetus grew, they actually define how these lines are going to grow and where they're going to be. These fingerprint lines. These fingerprint lines are ridges. That's what they're called. So we got to give them a name. The lines on your finger that form your fingerprints are called ridges, and they form three patterns. The three classes. There are three patterns that they form: loops, they form whorls, and arches. These are the three. There are only three. You might want to check your own after we get through with it to see which one you have. Okay, so loops. What can you use to identify a loop? Well, a loop starts in one direction. Let's say here, the ridge starts in one direction and doubles back and reverses to the opposite direction. You might also know that here there's also this part that's called a delta. Okay, now what about the whorl? That shows a spiral or circular pattern. There are like two deltas here, but we'll talk about the deltas later. But anyway, that makes a whorl. Remember, a loop circles back to itself. A whorl has like a circle. So in a way, in the middle, there's no real outward direction. Then finally, we have the arches. These are the rarest kind of fingerprints. Not that rare. It's 5% of people, so you'll find it. But the arch just goes in one direction and continues to the other direction. There are no deltas here, but we'll talk about deltas soon. Okay, so the three patterns. Again, loop doubles back in itself. Whorl has no outward direction, and the arch goes in one direction from beginning to end. Starts on one side, goes to the other, same direction. Here are loops. This is what a loop is. Here is an example of it. If I'm